The Shaw family mansion always felt colder on meeting days. Maybe it was the marble floors, or the way voices echoed off high ceilings, or just the icy stares from relatives who saw me as nothing more than a disappointment. Today was especially frigid. I adjusted my simple black dress, a stark contrast to my cousin's designer labels, and took my usual seat at the massive oak table. Last row, far corner. The designated spot for the family's problem child. Olivia. Aunt Margaret's voice dripped with false concern. So glad you could join us. I nodded politely, watching as the room filled with the Shaw family hierarchy. Uncle Robert, the self-appointed patriarch since my father's death. His wife Margaret, forever playing the concerned aunt while wielding gossip like a weapon. Their children, James and Catherine, groomed from birth to take over the family business. And of course, my mother, Victoria Shaw, who'd spent the last 15 years trying to erase any trace of my father from my personality. Now that everyone's here, Uncle Robert began, standing at the head of the table, we need to discuss some concerning matters. I knew what was coming. I'd overheard the whispers, seen the worried glances, noticed how they'd been monitoring my movements more closely lately. Olivia. He turned to me, his voice carrying that particular tone reserved for difficult children. We've been reviewing your recent activities. Of course they had. The Shaw family specialty. Surveillance disguised as care. Your spending patterns are concerning, he continued. Multiple large transfers, substantial stock purchases, property investments in areas we don't approve of. I kept my face neutral, even as I felt my pulse quicken. They've been watching my accounts. Probably had someone at the bank feeding them information. Classic Shaw tactics. We're worried about you, dear, Aunt Margaret chimed in. These risky investments, these questionable business decisions, it's not appropriate for someone of your limited experience. Catherine, my cousin, barely concealed her smirk. We just want to protect you from yourself. Liv. Protect me. The same excuse they'd used when they tried to stop me from going to business school. When they blocked my attempt to work at a competing firm. When they insisted I take a safe position in their company's HR department. The family has decided, Uncle Robert declared, that it's best to put you on a monthly allowance. A reasonable sum, of course. But all major financial decisions will need to be approved by the family council. I'm 28 years old, I said quietly. I don't need an allowance. Don't be difficult, Olivia, my mother snapped. This is for your own good. You're too much like your father, always chasing wild schemes, never thinking things through. The mention of my father sent a familiar ache through my chest. Alexander Shaw, the black sheep who dared to challenge the family's conservative investment approach. Who'd seen opportunities where they saw risks? Who'd died in a car accident when I was 13, leaving me alone in this pit of vipers? Your father's reckless decisions almost bankrupted this family, Uncle Robert reminded me. We won't let history repeat itself. I opened my laptop slowly, deliberately. Before you make any decisions about my financial capabilities, maybe you should look at something. Olivia, my mother warned, but I was already turning the screen around. The first page showed a simple investment portfolio. Blue chip stocks, conservative bonds, exactly what they'd expect. But as I clicked through to the next screen, the room temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Private equity holdings, venture capital investments, and most importantly, a substantial block of shares in Shaw Industries, purchased quietly through a series of shell companies over the past 5 years. What is this? Uncle Robert's voice had lost its condescending edge. My portfolio, I said calmly. The one you apparently missed while you were so busy monitoring my visible accounts. James leaned forward, his face paling as he recognized some of the companies listed. These are our major suppliers. I confirmed. And your technology partners. And your biggest distribution channels. I clicked to the next page. Oh, and this one might interest you, Uncle Robert. Remember that mysterious investor who's been buying up Shaw Industries stock through Goldman Sachs? The color drained from his face. That's impossible. We had our people check every buyer. Your people checked what I wanted them to see. I closed the laptop gently. My father taught me more than just wild schemes before he died. He taught me how to play the long game. You're lying, Catherine accused, but her voice shook slightly. There's no way you could have accumulated that much capital. I smiled, reaching into my bag for a folder I'd prepared. Remember that failing startup I invested in 3 years ago? The one you all mocked me for supporting? I slid the folder across the table. They were just acquired by Microsoft. For $8 billion. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother had gone completely still, her perfect posture frozen in shock. Aunt Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I've spent the last 5 years building something, I continued, my voice steady. While you were all busy watching my decoy accounts, criticizing my questionable decisions, and planning to put me on an allowance, I was becoming your largest individual shareholder. Uncle Robert's hands were shaking as he flipped through the documents. Why? He managed finally. Why go through all this deception? I stood up, smoothing my simple dress. Because you never would have let me do it openly. Because you were so convinced I was stupid, reckless, incapable, just like you thought my father was, that you never bothered to look deeper. The board meeting, James suddenly said, realization dawning on his face. Next week. The vote on the new direction for the company. Yes, I confirmed. Interesting timing for this family meeting, isn't it? Trying to restrict my financial control just days before a major board vote. Uncle Robert took a step toward me, his face reddening. Now listen here, young lady. No, I cut him off. You listen. For 15 years, I have watched you run this company exactly the way you've run this family, through control, manipulation, and fear. That ends now. I picked up my laptop and turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and about that allowance? I think we can table that discussion. I have a board meeting to prepare for. The last thing I heard as I walked out was Catherine's voice, barely a whisper. Dad, what just happened? I smiled as I stepped into the elevator. They had no idea that this was just the beginning. Monday's board meeting would bring revelations that would make today look like a minor family squabble. But for now, I had work to do. My father's legacy, and my own, depended on what happened next. In my car, I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. Michael? Yes. Everything went according to plan. Start contacting the other shareholders. It's time for phase 2. The Shaw family had always underestimated me. On Monday, they'd learn exactly how expensive that mistake was going to be. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation and strategic calls. By Sunday night, my phone had logged over 50 missed calls from various family members, each one more desperate than the last. Olivia, darling, let's discuss this like adults. Aunt Margaret, you're making a terrible mistake. Mother, this isn't what your father would have wanted. Uncle Robert, that last one made me laugh. They'd spent 15 years telling me my father was a failure. And now they wanted to use his memory as leverage? Too late. I sat in my home office, reviewing the documents one final time. The modern penthouse, purchased through one of my holding companies, offered a perfect view of the Shaw Industries headquarters. The same building where tomorrow, everything would change. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in, Sarah." My assistant entered, carrying a stack of folders. "Final confirmation from all the major shareholders. They'll support your motion tomorrow." I nodded, taking the folders. "And the press? On standby. The moment the vote is confirmed, they'll run the story." "Perfect." I stood, walking to the window. "Any word from Michael?" Sarah checked her tablet. "Yes, the auditors finished their review. Everything's documented, just as you suspected." I smiled. Uncle Robert had always been arrogant, but his arrogance had made him careless. The audit had uncovered exactly what I'd hoped it would: years of questionable transactions, nepotistic deals, and buried financial misconduct. My phone buzzed again. James this time. I answered, putting it on speaker. "Olivia, please," he started, his voice uncharacteristically humble. "We can work something out." "Can we, cousin?" "Like when you worked out having me removed from the executive training program." He faltered. "That was years ago. We were kids." "No, James. You were kids playing with your inheritance. I was building my own legacy." "The board meeting tomorrow." He hesitated. "What exactly are you planning?" "Guess you'll have to show up and find out." I ended the call and turned to Sarah. "Everything ready for tomorrow?" She nodded. "Car will pick you up at 8 a.m. Security team's been briefed. All documents are prepared." "Good. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be interesting." After she left, I opened my safe and pulled out an old, worn leather journal, my father's business diary. I found it hidden in his study after the accident, protected from the family's thorough cleaning of his belongings. Inside were detailed notes about every corrupt deal, every manipulated contract, every instance of Uncle Robert's mismanagement. But more importantly, it contained my father's true vision for Shaw Industries: innovative, ethical, forward-thinking. Everything the current leadership feared. "Watch me, Dad," I whispered, touching the worn pages. "Watch me finish what you started." Monday morning arrived clear and cold. I dressed carefully: charcoal gray suit, pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother, before the family had tried to deny me that inheritance too. Hair pulled back, severe and professional. The lobby of Shaw Industries was buzzing when I arrived. Board members, shareholders, and executives all trying to look busy while stealing glances at me. News had spread fast. "Olivia." Uncle Robert's voice boomed across the marble floor. "A word before the meeting?" I turned, facing him with a calm smile. "Sorry, Uncle. All communication should go through my legal team now." His face reddened. "This is family." "No," I cut him off. "This is business. You taught me that, remember? When you blocked my promotion? When you told everyone I was too emotional to handle client accounts?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Whatever you're planning, think carefully. You could destroy everything we've built." "You mean everything you've stolen?" I matched his quiet tone. "Everything you've manipulated and corrupted since my father died." Before he could respond, the elevator opened, and Michael Anderson stepped out, my father's old friend, and now my closest ally in the business world. "Olivia," Michael called out warmly. "Ready for today?" Uncle Robert's face went pale. Michael was not only a respected industry figure but also the head of the regulatory committee that oversaw family-owned corporations. More than ready, I replied, watching Uncle Robert retreat hastily. The boardroom filled quickly. I took my seat, not in my usual corner, but at the head of the table, the position of power I'd earned through years of patient strategy. Before we begin, Uncle Robert started, trying to maintain control. I think we should address the recent developments in family dynamics. Actually, I'd interrupted smoothly. We should follow the agenda. First item: leadership review and vote of confidence. I nodded to Sarah, who began distributing thick folders to each board member. What is this? Aunt Margaret demanded, flipping through the pages. A comprehensive audit of Shaw Industries management over the past 15 years. I replied. Pay special attention to pages 47 through 52. The evidence of financial misconduct is particularly interesting. The room erupted in whispers as people began reading. Uncle Robert's face went from red to white to gray in the span of seconds. This is a mistake, he stammered. These transactions were all approved. By you, I finished. Using your position as trustee after my father's death, including the systematic devaluation of his shares that should have been held in trust for me. James stood up, panic clear on his face. We can explain. Sit down, cousin, I said quietly. The time for explanations is over. Now it's time for changes. I stood, commanding the room's attention. As the majority shareholder of Shaw Industries, I call for an immediate vote on the current leadership. The next hour was chaos. Votes were cast. Accusations flew. Uncle Robert tried to challenge the legality of my share ownership, only to be shut down by both legal teams. In the end, the numbers were clear. 76% in favor of removal. Uncle Robert, Aunt Margaret, and their entire leadership team gone. Effective immediately. As security began escorting them out, my mother finally spoke up. What happens now? I turned to her, seeing fear in her eyes for the first time. Now we rebuild, the way Dad always wanted. The press release went out within the hour. Shaw Industries announces major leadership change. Olivia Shaw takes control in historic board vote. By evening, I sat alone in what had been Uncle Robert's office, looking out over the city. The same view he'd had while plotting to keep me powerless. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Your mother's downstairs. Should I send her up? I thought for a moment. Yes, it's time for another family meeting. Mother walked into the office like she was entering enemy territory, cautious, defensive, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. For a moment, looking at her perfectly coiffed hair and manicured appearance, I saw myself at 13, desperate for her approval, confused by her coldness after Dad's death. The prodigal daughter, she said, attempting sarcasm, but failing to hide her uncertainty. Satisfied with today's coup, I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit down, Mom. We need to talk. She perched on the edge of the seat, as if afraid to get too comfortable. I suppose you'll be removing me from the board as well. That depends, I replied, opening my laptop, on whether you're ready to hear the truth about Dad's death. Her perfectly composed face cracked slightly. What are you talking about? I turned the screen toward her. These are Dad's original business records. The ones Uncle Robert claimed were lost in the accident. Interesting how they showed up in his private safe, isn't it? Mother's hands began to shake. You've been in Robert's private files. I've been everywhere, Mom. In every account, every hidden folder, every secret meeting minute. I know exactly what happened 15 years ago. The color drained from her face as I continued. Dad wasn't being reckless with company money. He discovered Uncle Robert's embezzlement scheme. The accident happened the day before he was planning to take evidence to the board. No, she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. Yes, I said firmly. And you knew. Maybe not everything, but you knew something wasn't right. That's why you let them push me aside, minimize me, try to keep me from asking too many questions. Tears began to slip down her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. They said they were protecting the family name. They were protecting themselves, I corrected. And you helped them, all while treating Dad's memory like something shameful. She stood abruptly, pacing the office. What do you want from me, Olivia? An apology? Confession? It's been 15 years. I want the truth. For once in your life, just tell me the truth. She stopped at the window, staring out at the darkening sky. Robert, he told me Alexander was going to destroy everything, that his investigation would bankrupt us all. I was scared. When the accident happened, she trailed off. When the accident happened, you chose sides. I finished. You chose them over Dad's memory, over me. I chose survival, she snapped, turning to face me. I was 39 with a teenage daughter and no real power in this family. What would you have done? I stood slowly, walking to stand in front of her. I would have fought, like I've been fighting for the past 15 years, like Dad taught me to. Silence fell between us, heavy with years of unspoken pain. The investigators will want to talk to you, I said finally, about what you knew when you knew it. She nodded, suddenly looking old. And if I cooperate, then you can keep your board seat, under supervision, but your days of blind loyalty to Uncle Robert are over. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A news alert. Shaw Industries scandal deepens. Former leadership under criminal investigation. It's really over, isn't it? Mother asked, reading the headline over my shoulder. Their version is over, I corrected. Mine's just beginning. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. The criminal investigation into Uncle Robert and his associates expanded. James and Catherine fled to Europe, their assets frozen. Aunt Margaret had a very public breakdown at the country club. But more importantly, Shaw Industries began to transform. I implemented the innovative strategies my father had outlined in his journal, opened up leadership positions based on merit rather than family connections, established an ethics committee with real power. The market responded enthusiastically. Our stocks soared. New partnerships formed. The press dubbed it the Shaw Renaissance. 1 month after the takeover, I sat in my office reviewing quarterly reports when Sarah announced an unexpected visitor. Send them in, I said, not looking up from my work. Hello, Olivia. I froze at the familiar voice. Uncle Robert. Looking decades older, his confident swagger replaced by defeated slump. You're not supposed to be here, I said calmly, pressing the security button under my desk. I needed to see you, to understand. He gestured vaguely at the office at me. How did we not see it? I leaned back, studying him. You saw what you wanted to see. A quiet girl who wouldn't cause trouble. A convenient scapegoat for your schemes. Your father, he started, then stopped. Alexander would be proud. Don't? I cut him off sharply. Don't you dare speak about my father. Security arrived, ready to escort him out. "One last thing," he said as they took his arms. "Was it worth it? Destroying your family for revenge?" I stood, walking to face him. This wasn't about revenge, Uncle Robert. This was about justice. For Dad. For every person you've crushed under your power games. The family destroyed itself. I just exposed the rot. After he was gone, I opened my father's journal again, turning to the last entry he'd written before his death. "To my dearest Olivia, never let them make you doubt yourself. True power isn't in controlling others. It's in staying true to your principles. They may call you weak now, but someday you'll show them what real strength looks like. I believe in you always." Tears blurred my vision as I traced his handwriting. "We did it, Dad," I whispered. "We finally did it." My phone buzzed. A text from Mother. "Dinner tonight? Just us?" I hesitated, then replied, "Yes, we have a lot to talk about." Looking out over the city, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in 15 years. The Shaw family would never be the same. But maybe that was exactly what it needed. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for tomorrow. The agenda included finalizing the company's new direction, appointing a fresh leadership team, and establishing the Alexander Shaw Foundation for Business Ethics. They'd called me stupid, incapable, too weak to handle money. Now they called me CEO. But more importantly, I could finally call myself my father's daughter, proudly, openly, without shame or doubt. And that was worth more than all the Shaw family millions combined. The day Aunt Eleanor died, I was elbow deep in garden soil, planting the heirloom roses she'd given me for my birthday. My phone buzzed 3 times before I finally pulled off my gloves to answer it. "Miss Blackwood?" A formal voice I didn't recognize. "This is James Morton, your Aunt Eleanor's attorney. I'm afraid I have some difficult news." My heart stopped. The roses suddenly felt heavy in my hands. Eleanor's last gift to me. "What happened?" "Your aunt passed away in her sleep last night. He hesitated. She left explicit instructions for me to contact you first, before anyone else in the family." I sank to my knees in the dirt, barely registering his words. Aunt Eleanor, the woman who taught me to read, who'd snuck me chocolate chip cookies during dreary family functions, who'd supported every dream I'd ever had, was gone. "Miss Blackwood, are you there?" "Yes," I managed. "I'm here." What do you need me to do?" "Your aunt left specific instructions about her funeral arrangements." And another pause. "She left you a letter that must be opened before the service. Would you be able to come to my office today?" I looked down at the roses. Queen Elizabeth variety, Eleanor's favorite. She'd handed them to me just 2 weeks ago, her eyes twinkling with her usual mischief. "These have been in my family for generations," she'd said, "just like secrets." At the time, I thought it was just another of her cryptic comments. Now, I wasn't so sure. "I'll be there in an hour," I told the lawyer. James Morton's office was exactly what you'd expect from someone who handled old money. All dark wood and leather-bound books, with a view of the city skyline that probably cost more than my yearly salary. He stood as I entered, offering a sympathetic smile. "Miss Blackwood, thank you for coming so quickly. Please, have a seat." I sat in one of the plush leather chairs, trying not to fit it. "Mr. Morton, what's this about? Why did Aunt Eleanor want you to contact me first?" He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out 2 envelopes. One was thick, official-looking, with the law firm's letterhead. The other was smaller, cream-colored, with my name written in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. "Your aunt was an unusual woman. Morton said carefully. Brilliant in business, but also quite particular about how things should be done. She left very specific instructions about her will and her funeral arrangements. That sounds like Eleanor, I said softly. He slid the cream envelope across the desk. She wanted you to read this privately. Then we can discuss the rest. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the envelope. Eleanor's distinctive perfume, roses and vanilla, still clung to the paper. I opened it carefully, pulling out a single sheet of her personal stationery. My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, I've finally run out of time. Don't be sad. I've lived exactly the life I wanted, which is more than most people can say. But I need one last favor from you, my darling niece. At my funeral, you'll need to read a letter. One that will change our family forever. You'll find it in the hidden compartment of my jewelry box, the one I showed you how to open when you were 12. Remember the trick with the rose carving? Some people might call this revenge, but I prefer to think of it as justice. Long delayed, perhaps, but justice nonetheless. The truth is, I've left everything to you. Montgomery Industries, my personal assets, all of it. But there's one condition. You must read that letter at my funeral, with the entire family present. No exceptions. I know this is a lot to ask, especially now. But you've always been the strong one, Olivia. The honest one. That's why it has to be you. All my love, Aunt Eleanor. P.S. Don't let them bury me in anything beige. You know how I feel about beige. I read the letter twice, then looked up at Morton. She left everything to me. He nodded, opening the official envelope. Montgomery Industries, her personal estate, investment portfolios, approximately $89 million in total assets. But as she mentioned, it's conditional on you fulfilling her final request. My head spun. Eleanor had always been generous with me, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. What about the rest of the family? My father, my cousins? There are some small bequests, but the bulk of the estate is yours, assuming, of course, you agree to her terms. I thought about my father, who'd always resented his younger sister's success. About my cousins, who'd spent years sucking up to Eleanor, hoping to inherit her fortune. About all the family gatherings where Eleanor had sat quietly, watching everyone with those knowing eyes of hers, like she was waiting for something. When is the funeral? I asked. 3 days from now. Your aunt was very specific about the arrangements. The service will be held at St. Michael's Cathedral, followed by a reception at her estate. The entire family is expected to attend. I stood up, clutching Eleanor's letter. Then I should go. I have a jewelry box to find. Morton called after me as I reached the door. Miss Blackwood? One more thing. Your aunt asked me to tell you. She said you'll know what to do with the truth. The drive to Eleanor's estate took 40 minutes, but it felt like hours. My mind raced with questions. What was it in that second letter? What secret was so important that Eleanor would make it a condition of her will? The gates opened automatically as I approached. Eleanor had given me the access code years ago, saying she trusted me more than her security system. The house was exactly as I remembered. A sprawling Victorian mansion set amid perfectly manicured gardens, with Eleanor's beloved roses climbing every available surface. Mrs. Peters, the housekeeper, met me at the door. Her eyes were red from crying. Oh, Miss Olivia, I'm so glad you're here. She left instructions that you were to have full access to her rooms. Thank you, Mrs. Peters. I won't be long. Eleanor's bedroom was on the second floor, overlooking her prize, rose garden. Like everything else about my aunt, it was elegant but full of hidden whimsy. Silk curtains in bright patterns, modern art next to family portraits, and everywhere, touches of her beloved roses. The jewelry box sat on her dresser, exactly where it had always been. Beautiful Brazilian rosewood, carved with intricate floral patterns. I ran my fingers along the edge until I found it. The small rose carving that concealed the release for the hidden compartment. Third petal from the left, I whispered, remembering Eleanor's instructions from all those years ago. There was a soft click, and a panel in the bottom slid open. Inside was another envelope, sealed with wax and marked to be read at my funeral. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected, and I could feel what seemed like photographs inside. For a moment, I was tempted to open it right there. But I knew Eleanor. Everything she did had a purpose. If she wanted this revealed at her funeral, in front of the whole family, she must have had her reasons. I slipped the envelope into my bag and took one last look around the room. On the bedside table was a framed photo I'd never seen before. Eleanor as a young woman, standing in front of Montgomery Industries' first office. She was smiling that knowing smile of hers, the one that always made me feel like she could see right through people's pretenses. "What did you know, Aunt Eleanor?" I whispered to the photograph. What secret was worth waiting a lifetime to reveal? The next 3 days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements and family drama. My father called 6 times, alternating between concern about my involvement in the arrangements and barely concealed anxiety about the will. My cousins sent a barrage of text messages, each one more transparently self-interested than the last. Through it all, I kept Eleanor's sealed envelope close. At night, I'd take it out and look at it, wondering what revelations it contained. What truth was so important that Eleanor would stake her entire legacy on its revelation? The morning of the funeral dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a deep blue suit, Eleanor's favorite color, and pinned one of her prized roses to my lapel. The envelope felt heavy in my bag, like it was weighted with more than just paper and photographs. St. Michael's Cathedral was packed by the time I arrived. The Montgomerys were old money, and Eleanor had been a prominent figure in both business and philanthropy. The pews were filled with a mix of family, business associates, and city officials. My father intercepted me as soon as I entered, his face tight with anxiety. "Olivia, we need to talk about the will. Morton won't tell us anything. Says we have to wait until after the service." "What's going on?" I met his eyes steadily. "We'll all find out together, Dad. That's what Aunt Eleanor wanted." He grabbed my arm as I tried to pass. "Olivia, if you know something..." "Let go, Dad," I said quietly, but firmly. "This is Eleanor's funeral. Show some respect." The service itself was beautiful, exactly as Eleanor would have wanted it. No beige in sight. The flowers were all roses in deep reds and vibrant pinks, her favorite colors. The minister spoke about her generosity, her intelligence, her dedication to making the world better. Finally, it was time. Morton caught my eye from the front pew and gave a slight nod. My hands trembled slightly as I walked to the podium, Eleanor's envelope clutched in my hands. The cathedral fell silent as I faced the congregation. My father sat in the front row, his face a mask of barely controlled anxiety. Next to him, my cousins John and Rebecca leaned forward eagerly, like vultures awaiting their next meal. I took a deep breath, breathing in the scent of roses that filled the air. In that moment, I could almost feel Eleanor standing beside me, giving me strength. Before she died, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. My Aunt Eleanor left me a letter with specific instructions. She wanted it read here today, in front of everyone who knew her. I broke the wax seal slowly, aware of hundreds of eyes watching my every move. Inside were several sheets of paper, and as I'd suspected, photographs. As I pulled them out, I heard my father make a strangled sound from the front pew. The first photograph showed a young Eleanor standing next to a man I didn't recognize. They were both smiling, holding up what looked like blueprints. The second photo showed the same man at what appeared to be a construction site, with the early foundations of what I now recognized as Montgomery Industries' first building. My name was Eleanor Montgomery. I read from the letter. And this is the truth about how Montgomery Industries began. My hands were steady as I began reading Eleanor's letter, my voice carrying clearly through the hushed cathedral. My name was Eleanor Montgomery, and this is the truth about how Montgomery Industries began. The man in these photographs is Harold Bennett, a brilliant engineer and my business partner in 1975. He was also the true founder of what would become Montgomery Industries. A murmur rippled through the congregation. In the front row, my father's face had gone completely white. Harold and I met at university. I continued reading. We shared a vision of creating sustainable building materials that would revolutionize the construction industry. Harold had the technical genius, and I had the business acumen. Together, we created the foundation of what Montgomery Industries would become. I pulled out another photograph, this one showing Eleanor and Harold shaking hands over what appeared to be a contract. We were equal partners, splitting everything 50-50. The patents, the company, the profits, all of it was shared between us. Until the night of October 15, 1976, when Harold died in what was reported as a car accident. My father started to stand, but my Uncle James pulled him back down. I kept reading. But it wasn't an accident. The brake lines in Harold's car had been cut. I discovered this too late, after the police had already closed the case. I also discovered something else. Papers had been filed just hours before Harold's death, transferring his entire share of the company to the Montgomery Family Trust. Papers that bore his signature. I looked up, meeting my father's eyes directly. A signature that I now know was forged by his business partner at the time, my own brother, Richard Montgomery. The cathedral erupted in gasps and whispers. My father stood up, his face contorted with rage. "Stop this immediately," he shouted. "This is slander." "No, Dad," I said calmly. "This is truth. Aunt Eleanor left proof." I held up a stack of documents from the envelope. The original contract between Eleanor and Harold. Forensic analysis of the forged documents. Police reports that were buried. Bank transfers. She kept everything. Why? The question came from my cousin John, who was staring at his uncle, my father, with dawning horror. Why reveal this now? I turned back to Eleanor's letter. "I'm revealing this now because I've spent 45 years building this company into something Harold would have been proud of. I've used our success to fund research, to support sustainable development, to create opportunities for brilliant minds like his. But I've also spent 45 years watching my brother profit from his crime, watching him raise his children to believe that privilege and power put them above the law." My father had sunk back into his pew, all the fight gone out of him. I continued reading. "The truth is, I should have come forward years ago. But by the time I had gathered all the evidence, the company was employing thousands of people. Going public would have destroyed not just Richard, but countless innocent families who depended on Montgomery Industries for their livelihood. So I made a different choice. I decided to wait, to build, to make sure that when the truth finally came out, the company would survive it. I pulled out one final document from the envelope, a yellowed envelope addressed to Harold Bennett's only surviving relative, his daughter Sarah. Which brings me to my final confession. Over the years, I've kept track of Harold's daughter. I've anonymously funded her education, her research, her work in sustainable engineering. I've watched her grow into the kind of brilliant, ethical scientist her father was. Sarah Bennett now runs one of the most innovative green technology firms in the country, though she's never known who was backing her. More guests filled the cathedral as a woman stood up from the middle pews. She was about my age, with Harold's dark eyes and determined expression. Eleanor had arranged everything, even ensuring Sarah Bennett would be here for this moment. The second part of my will, I read, my voice growing stronger, leaves a 30% share of Montgomery Industries to Sarah Bennett as partial restitution for what was stolen from her father. The controlling interest goes to my niece Olivia, the only member of the Montgomery family who has shown the same commitment to ethics and innovation that Harold and I once shared. I looked up at the stunned faces before me. The letter is signed, Eleanor Montgomery, co-founder of Montgomery Industries and keeper of its greatest shame. The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly, Sarah Bennett began walking toward the front of the cathedral. She stopped in front of my father, who seemed to have aged decades in the past few minutes. All these years, Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly, I thought my father was a failure who abandoned his work. I never knew, never imagined. Miss Bennett, I said, stepping down from the podium, I'm so sorry for what was taken from you. She turned to me, tears in her eyes. Thank you for having the courage to read that letter. Your aunt? She was watching over me my whole life, wasn't she? She was trying to make things right, I said softly, in her own way. The next few hours passed in a blur. The reception was unsurprisingly tense, with family members splitting into factions. Those who demanded the letter be suppressed, those who insisted on going to the police, and those who simply sat in stunned silence. My father disappeared immediately after the service. I wouldn't hear from him for weeks, not until he checked himself into a rehabilitation facility, finally facing the guilt he carried for 45 years. In the months that followed, the truth about Montgomery Industries' founding became public knowledge. But Eleanor had been right. The company was strong enough to survive it. With Sarah Bennett's technical expertise and my commitment to Eleanor's vision, we began a new chapter in the company's history. 1 year after the funeral, I stood in Eleanor's rose garden, now blooming more beautifully than ever. Sarah had joined me for what had become our weekly meeting, where we discussed everything from company strategy to our shared love of sustainable innovation. You know what's strange? Sarah said, gently touching one of Eleanor's prized Queen Elizabeth roses. I always felt like someone was looking out for me, guiding my career from afar. I used to think it was my father's spirit. Now I know it was Eleanor. She tried to protect everyone, I said. The company, its employees, you, even my father in her own way. She just couldn't let the truth die with her. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Do you think she made the right choice, waiting all those years? I considered the question carefully. I think she did the best she could with an impossible situation. She turned a company built on fraud into a force for good. She made sure you were taken care of. And in the end, she made sure the truth came out on her terms. And what about you? Sarah asked. Do you ever regret being the one who had to reveal it all? I looked out over the rose garden, remembering Eleanor's knowing smile, her cryptic comments, her quiet strength. No, I said finally. Eleanor chose me because she knew I could handle it. She knew I'd understand that sometimes doing the right thing means facing uncomfortable truths. She would be proud of what we've built, Sarah said, gesturing toward the Montgomery Industries building visible in the distance. A real partnership, just like she and my father intended. I smiled, touching one of the roses Eleanor had given me, now blooming in her garden. She once told me these roses had been in her family for generations, just like secrets. But maybe it's time for new traditions. Truth instead of secrets. Partnership instead of power. Building something together instead of taking from each other. Sarah squeezed my hand. I think both our fathers would like that. That evening, as I sat in Eleanor's study, now my study, going over company reports, I found a small note tucked into her old desk calendar. It was dated the day she died, written in her elegant hand. Dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, you've done what I asked. You've faced the truth and handled it with grace. That's why I chose you, not just to inherit the company, but to make it better than it was, to make it what Harold and I dreamed it could be. The roses in the garden will bloom again next spring. When they do, remember that beauty can grow from even the darkest soil, if we have the courage to plant it. All my love, Eleanor. I placed the note carefully in my drawer and looked out at the garden, where the setting sun painted the roses in shades of gold. Eleanor had left me more than just a company. She'd left me a chance to right an old wrong, to build something meaningful, to prove that it's never too late for truth to bloom. Tomorrow, there would be meetings and decisions and all the responsibilities that came with running a multi-million-dollar company. But for now, I sat in the quiet of Eleanor's study, surrounded by the scent of roses, knowing that sometimes the heaviest inheritances aren't measured in money, but in the weight of the truths we choose to carry. And like Eleanor, I would carry this truth with grace, using it not to destroy, but to build, not to punish, but to heal, creating something beautiful from the soil of the past. After all, that's what Eleanor had done. That's what she had trained me to do. And somewhere, I knew, she was watching with that knowing smile of hers, proud that her final secret had finally found its way into the light. The crystal glasses clinked against the mahogany dining table as my father's laughter echoed to our family home. It wasn't the warm kind of laughter that makes you feel safe. It was sharp, dismissive, the kind that cuts deep and leaves scars. 30 years old, living in that tiny apartment, and still no real job, he continued, swirling his aged whiskey. I always knew you'd struggle without proper direction, Sophia, but this is truly pathetic. My sister Victoria dabbed her lips with an embroidered napkin, perfectly manicured nails gleaming under the chandelier light. At least she showed up this time, she said with fake sympathy. Though maybe it would have been better if she hadn't. I sat there, quietly cutting my steak into precise squares, just as I had done at countless family dinners before. Each piece exactly the same size, each movement deliberate and controlled, just like my plan. Tell us again, Sophia, my mother chimed in, her voice dripping with artificial concern. What exactly do you do all day? Surely you're not still working on that. What did you call it? That little online project. The little online project they were mocking had just cleared $50 million in revenue last quarter, but they didn't need to know that. Not yet. Actually, I said, keeping my voice steady, I've been quite busy lately. Just finalized a rather significant purchase. Dad nearly choked on his whiskey. Purchase? What could you possibly purchase? A new coffee maker for that shabby apartment of yours? Victoria snickered. Or maybe she finally bought a professional outfit for job interviews. God knows she needs one. I placed my fork down gently, remembering the stack of papers I'd signed just hours earlier. The acquisition documents for Barrett and Sons, the company my father had worked at for 30 years, the same company where Victoria was now Junior VP of Marketing, the same company that had rejected my application 5 years ago because I wasn't management material. Something like that, I replied softly, taking a small sip of water. Let them laugh. Tomorrow would be interesting enough. My father launched into his favorite lecture, the one about wasted potential and family disappointment. I'd heard it so many times I could recite it word for word. How I'd embarrassed him by dropping out of business school. How Victoria had followed the proper path, climbing the corporate ladder at Barrett and Sons while I played around on computers. What they didn't know was that my playing around had built Nexus Technologies, one of the fastest-growing digital infrastructure companies in the country. I'd kept my name out of the press, used a holding company for public dealings, and let everyone assume I was just another failed startup kid living off family charity. At least tell me you're looking for real work, Dad pressed, his voice growing harder. Barrett and Sons always needs administrative assistance. Though with your track record, even that might be a stretch. I thought about the meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning, about the email that would go out to all Barrett and Sons employees at exactly 9 a.m., about how the company's new owner would be announced, and how my father's face would look when he realized who that owner was. Actually, I said, standing up slowly, I should get going. Big day tomorrow. Victoria rolled her eyes. What's big about another day of unemployment? I picked up my purse, a simple leather bag that probably cost more than their monthly salaries combined. You'll see, I said quietly. Thank you for dinner, Mother. As I walked to my car, I could hear them through the open dining room window, their laughter mixing with cruel speculation about my future. I smiled, knowing it would be the last time they'd laugh at me like this. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus, my COO. Everything's set for tomorrow. Board approved the final terms. You ready for this? I typed back a simple yes as I slid into my Tesla Model S, a car I never drove to family dinners. Better to let them think I still took the bus. The drive home was quiet, city lights blurring past, as I thought about the journey that had led here. 5 years ago, I'd walked out of Barrett and Sons after a humiliating rejection interview. Victoria had been on the panel, smirking as she informed me I wasn't qualified for even an entry-level position. That night, I'd taken my savings, a solid understanding of enterprise software, and an idea that would revolutionize how companies managed their digital infrastructure. While they thought I was failing, I was building. While they mocked my little online project, I was scaling. And now, while they laughed at my unemployment, I was about to become their boss. My apartment wasn't actually small. It occupied the entire top floor of a renovated industrial building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that reminded me daily of what I'd built. I kicked off my modest flats, replacing them with the Louboutins I preferred when not playing a role. Another message from Marcus. PR team has the announcement ready. Legal says everything's clean. No way for them to challenge the acquisition. I poured myself a glass of champagne I'd been saving for this moment. Perfect, I replied. See you at 8:30 a.m. Settling onto my balcony, I watched the city pulse below. Tomorrow, everything would change. Not just for my family, but for Barrett and Sons itself. The company had potential, but it was stuck in the past, resistant to digital transformation, bleeding market share to more innovative competitors. That's why the board had been so eager to accept my offer. They'd seen what Nexus Technologies could do, how we transformed other traditional companies into digital leaders. They didn't care that I was Richard Barrett's daughter. They cared that I could save their company. My phone lit up again, this time with a message from Victoria. "Thanks for gracing us with your pathetic presence tonight. Maybe next time bring some actual accomplishments to discuss." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and reviewed the announcement one last time. Barrett & Sons announces acquisition by Nexus Technologies. Sophia Barrett, founder and CEO of Nexus Technologies, to lead digital transformation initiative. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., this would hit every major business news outlet. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., my father would learn that his unemployed daughter now owned his company. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., Victoria would discover that her pathetic sister was her new boss. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about potential, both mine and Barrett & Sons. I had plans for the company, innovations that would propel it into the future. The fact that those plans would force my family to finally see me clearly, that was just a bonus. I finished my champagne and walked back inside, catching my reflection in the window. I looked nothing like the meek, uncertain woman my family thought they knew. In my real life, running Nexus Technologies, I was known for being sharp, decisive, and unapologetically ambitious. Tomorrow, worlds would collide. Tomorrow, masks would fall away. Tomorrow, everything would change. As I prepared for bed, I thought about what my father always said about proper direction and family disappointment. He was right about one thing: direction was important. He just never realized I'd found my own. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, perfect weather for a corporate takeover. I dressed carefully in a tailored black Alexander McQueen suit, Louboutins clicking against hardwood floors as I gathered my things. Today wasn't a day for playing small. Marcus met me in the lobby of Barrett & Sons headquarters at exactly 8:30 a.m. He looked sharp in his usual dark suit, tablet in hand, ready for what promised to be an interesting morning. "Board's already here," he said, falling into step beside me. "Security's been briefed. HR has the new organizational charts ready to distribute. Everything's in place." I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. And my father? Victoria? Both arrived early. They're in their offices. No idea what's coming. The elevator rode smoothly to the top floor, where the board was waiting in the main conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see my father in his office down the hall, probably reviewing reports, completely unaware that his world was about to shift. At precisely 9 a.m., as planned, every computer in the building displayed a mandatory meeting notification. At the same time, the press release went live, and my family's phones would be lighting up with the news they never saw coming. I straightened my shoulders and took a deep breath. Time to step into the light. "Ready?" Marcus asked, hand on the conference room door. I smiled, thinking of last night's dinner, of all the dinners before it, of every dismissive laugh, every cruel comment, every moment they underestimated me. "Oh yes," I said quietly. "I've been ready for years." The door opened, and I walked in to take my place at the head of the table. The board members stood respectfully, already aware of what was about to unfold. Through the glass walls, I could see employees gathering, phones in hand, whispering as they read the announcement. And then I heard it, my father's voice, loud and confused, echoing down the hallway. "What the hell is this? This has to be a mistake." I smiled. The show was about to begin. My father's footsteps thundered down the hallway, each step heavy with confusion and rage. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I watched him approach, his face reddening as he gripped his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. Behind him, Victoria hurried to keep up, her designer heels stumbling slightly as she tried to maintain her usual composure. My father's footsteps thundered down the hallway, each step heavy with confusion and rage. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I watched him approach, his face reddening as he gripped his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. Behind him, Victoria hurried to keep up, her designer heels stumbling slightly as she tried to maintain her usual composure. The board members exchanged knowing glances. They'd been prepared for this moment, briefed on the likelihood of a scene. I remained standing, calm and steady at the head of the table, as my father burst through the door. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, thrusting his phone forward. The press release glowed on the screen, my name and title clear as day. Sophia Barrett, CEO of Nexus Technologies? This has to be some kind of joke. I smiled slightly, the same soft smile I'd given at countless family dinners. "Good morning, Dad. I see you've received the announcement." Victoria pushed past him, her perfectly arranged features twisted with disbelief. "This isn't possible," she sputtered. You're unemployed. You live in that tiny apartment. You can't even afford a proper car." Actually, Marcus stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Ms. Barrett owns the entire building she lives in. As for transportation, there's a Ferrari in her private garage, though she prefers the Tesla for daily use. Shall I continue?" "That's enough, Marcus," I said quietly. "I'm sure they're getting the picture." My father's face had gone from red to pale. He gripped the back of a chair, staring at me like he was seeing a stranger. In many ways he was. "How?" he whispered. "How is this possible?" I gestured for everyone to sit. The board members complied immediately, but my father and Victoria remained standing, still frozen in shock. "It's quite simple," I began, my voice steady and professional. 5 years ago, when Barrett and Sons rejected my application, telling me I wasn't qualified for even an entry-level position, I decided to build something of my own. That little online project you've been mocking? That's Nexus Technologies. We revolutionized digital infrastructure management. Last quarter's revenue was just over $50 million. Victoria's designer bag slipped from her shoulder, hitting the floor with a dull thud. But you never said anything. You let us think." "I let you think what you wanted to think. I finished for her. It was easier that way, more peaceful, and honestly, your assumptions made this acquisition much smoother." My father finally found his voice again. "Acquisition? You bought Barrett and Sons." The board approved the sale unanimously, I confirmed, nodding to the members seated around the table. "Barrett and Sons needs digital transformation to survive in today's market. Nexus Technologies can provide that. It's a smart business decision. Nothing more." "Nothing more," he exploded, his face reddening again. "You secretly built a company, let your family think you were a failure, then bought out the company I've worked at for 30 years. And you call that nothing more?" I stood slowly, placing both hands on the table. "No, Dad, you let yourself think I was a failure. You chose to mock rather than ask questions. You decided I was pathetic without ever bothering to understand what I was building. Those were your choices." The room fell silent. Through the glass walls, I could see employees gathering, trying to appear busy while obviously watching the drama unfold. I didn't mind. Let them see. Let everyone see. As of 9 a.m. this morning, I continued, I am the CEO of both Nexus Technologies and Barrett & Sons. We'll be announcing the merger and digital transformation initiative later today. Your positions, I looked between my father and Victoria, will be evaluated as part of the restructuring process. Victoria's face went pale. You can't fire us. We're family. I felt a smile tug at my lips. Funny. Being family didn't stop you from rejecting my application 5 years ago. In fact, I believe your exact words were family connections don't guarantee employment. Isn't that right? She sank into a chair, finally seeming to understand the magnitude of what was happening. Marcus, I turned to my COO. Please escort Mr. Barrett and Ms. Barrett to their offices. HR will be meeting with them shortly to discuss transition options. As Marcus moved to comply, my father stepped forward. Sophia, wait. Please. We need to talk about this. No, Dad, I said firmly. We needed to talk 5 years ago. We needed to talk at every family dinner where you belittled my choices. We needed to talk last night when you called me pathetic. Now we need to focus on business. He stared at me for a long moment, seeing me clearly perhaps for the first time. Gone was the meek daughter he thought he knew, replaced by someone he clearly didn't recognize. Was any of it real? He asked quietly. The small apartment, the bus rides, the struggling daughter act? The apartment is the entire top floor, I replied. The bus? Well, I believe in environmental responsibility. And the struggling? That was just your perception. I never actually said I was struggling. You just assumed. As Marcus led them out, I could hear Victoria's heels clicking against the floor, punctuated by what sounded suspiciously like a sob. My father's shoulders were slumped, his usual confident stride replaced by something heavier, more uncertain. Once they were gone, I turned back to the board. Now, shall we discuss the transformation timeline? The rest of that day passed in a blur of meetings, press interviews, and employee briefings. By late afternoon, my office, formerly my father's, was set up exactly as I wanted it. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city I'd conquered, while inside, modern technology replaced the heavy old furniture my father had insisted on keeping. Around 6 p.m., as the office was quieting down, Marcus knocked on my door. Your mother's here, he said softly. Should I send her away? I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. No, send her in. She entered hesitantly, looking smaller somehow without my father beside her. Her designer outfit was slightly rumpled, as if she'd been sitting and wringing her hands for hours. Sophia, she began, then stopped, seemingly unsure how to continue. Have a seat, Mother. I gestured to one of the sleek chairs facing my desk. She sat carefully, her eyes taking in the changed office. Your father, he's not well. This has been quite a shock. I imagine it has been, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Finding out your pathetic daughter is actually a successful CEO must be quite surprising. She flinched at the word pathetic. We never meant to hurt you, Sophia. We just wanted what was best for you. No, I corrected her gently. You wanted what was best for your image. There's a difference. Perhaps, she admitted, and for the first time, I heard genuine regret in her voice. But we're still family. Surely there's a way to fix this. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. This isn't something that needs fixing, Mother. The company needed digital transformation. I provided a solution. Business is business. And family? What about family? Family, I said slowly, is what you make of it. For years, you and Dad and Victoria made it clear what you thought of me. Now it's my turn to show you who I really am. She stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. And who is that exactly? I smiled, not unkindly. Someone who built something meaningful, while you were all too busy laughing to notice. Someone who values actions over appearances. Someone who won't apologize for success, even if it makes others uncomfortable. She nodded slowly, then turned to leave. At the door, she paused. Your father? He's proud, you know. Beneath the shock and anger, I can see it. He's proud and terrified and ashamed all at once. Good, I said softly. He should be. After she left, I walked to the window, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and purple. My phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. I'm sorry for everything. Can we talk? Please? I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I thought about the long game, about how success isn't just about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. About how sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch most carefully. Finally, I typed back, Monday, 9 a.m. We'll discuss your role in the new organization. Another message appeared, this time from my father. You've outdone yourself, Sophia. I never saw it coming. I'm sorry I never saw you. This one, I left unanswered. Some revelations don't need a response. Sometimes silence speaks volumes. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Cars ready whenever you are, boss. I gathered my things, taking one last look around the office that had once represented everything I couldn't have. Now it was just another milestone on a journey that was far from over. You know, Marcus said as we walked to the elevator, I've never seen anyone pull off a takeover with quite so much style. I laughed softly. It wasn't about style, Marcus. It was about substance, something my family never quite understood. The Tesla waited in the underground parking garage, sleek and silent. As we drove through the evening traffic, I thought about last night's dinner, about how different everything would be now. No more hiding, no more pretending, no more quiet smiles while they laughed. Where to? Marcus asked. Your place? I shook my head. The office. Nexus Technologies. We've got a merger to plan. Because that's the thing about success. It's not an endpoint. It's a beginning. And I was just getting started. 3 months later, Barrett & Sons had been fully integrated into Nexus Technologies. The digital transformation was ahead of schedule. Profits were up, and employee satisfaction had improved dramatically. Victoria had accepted a position in marketing, humbled but determined to prove herself on merit alone. My father had taken early retirement, though he occasionally sent emails with suggestions for the company, some actually quite insightful. Family dinners. We still had them, but they were different now. No more mockery, no more assumptions, no more quiet smiles hiding bigger truths. Now we talked about real things. Business, innovation, the future. And if sometimes the conversation got a bit tense, well, that was just part of the new normal. As for me, I kept the simple apartment, though I didn't pretend it was small anymore. I still took the bus sometimes, not out of pretense, but because it gave me time to think. And that little online project, it just kept growing, expanding, transforming. Because that's what happens when you stop letting others define your worth. You define it yourself, quietly, steadily, one success at a time. And sometimes, just sometimes, you get to watch their faces when they finally figure it out.